Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. Today we're going to continue our discussion that we started last week about all things CISO related. Helping us today is Barak Engel. He is Chief Geek at eImmune. He is a pioneering virtual CISO, and he also is an author of a book called Why CISOs Fail, as well as a soon-to-be released new edition that he calls The Security Hippie. We'll get his thoughts on the virtues of being a CISO, hear a little bit about his first book, and then hear hopefully more about his forthcoming book, which he tells me is mostly stories, and we might even get him to give us a little bit of a dramatic reading from his book, like authors do. All this and more. We're looking forward to an entertaining and informative discussion today as we close out the year, and we'd like you to join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly.
Welcome to episode 99 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on December 21st, first day of winter, I believe, 2021. I am your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joining me today are my Bay Area contingent co-hosts, Ms. Kat Valentine and Mr. Frederick Flea Lee. I've got it in my notes as Cat and Flea, and I feel like I need to have some sort of animal nickname, and we start like becoming the Avengers or something like that.
You kind of are an old dog, so,
Yeah, that's true. I could do that. You could be Flea Man and Catwoman or something like that.
Yes, there you go.
Anyway, do have a few announcements before we jump into the frivolity of today. Of course, we're all going to be off the next couple weeks, and if you start missing us, you can find all sorts of Security Weekly content by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe. There you can subscribe to the podcast, you can find episodes that we've already aired, and you can actually download them to your phone right now. Why in the world people would want to walk around with me on their phone, I don't know. But it's something you can do. Must be a young thing. Join our mailing list, join the Discord server, find us on social media, the streaming platforms, and so on and so forth. Now, next year we'll be back, and one of the first events is January 20th, where we're going to have an online webcast where you can learn how to build your own security lab at home. That could be interesting. And also, don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings. You can find this at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, enough of that. I have known today's guests for several years. I'm not even sure exactly how long. I don't know if he remembers. I'm guessing it's been at least 10 years. I'm pretty sure we met
15.
Is it more like 15? Time flies.
Something like that, yeah. Yep.
And we're old. I'm pretty sure we met at one of the PCI community meetings. Barak has been friends and family with the company that I work for now, Online Business Systems. But we first met when we were probably VeriSign, if we're really going back 15 years. So just remember, PCI does bring people together. That's one of the positive notes about PCI. But anyway, I asked Barak if he'd be willing to come on the show sometime, and then like a year later, here I am like, hey, we should do this sometime. So Barak, without further ado, welcome to Security and Compliance Weekly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. That's kind of awesome. And I have an answer for you as to why people want you on their phone. Because you're the best grandpa I have.
Hey, there we go. If you ever need a little bit, Grandpa, I think somebody has suggested that has referred to me as InfoSec Grandpa. I think I could take that. I could live with that. Well, Barak, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into cybersecurity. I've never asked you this, but I'm taking the opportunity. But how do you take credit for being a pioneering virtual CISO? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. So those are two separate questions. How I got into cybersecurity? Well, we're old timers, so I'm the same generation of the kids who were breaking apart their Atari to see what's inside, and I still remember. And I kid you not, when I was probably 13, I was messing with software protection back in the day, which was sort of ridiculous. It was mostly hex editing of files, and I don't know if you remember, hackers would put a splash screen in front of, say, the game that they hacked. Right, it wasn't really particularly difficult, and you would literally put your phone number on there so that people can contact you, your phone number at home. And I made some good connections that way. And my handle that I was using was the sort of Hebrew version of pain in the ass, quite literally.
Which is?
Well, it was a Hebrew English version. So I used to call myself Kotz in the Pots, Kotz being a thorn, and Pots being sort of a Yiddish version of ass. So
okay, I like it.
That was my actual handle at the time. So you kind of do this, but you don't think of yourself as a security person, right? Then I ended up getting my first formal security job in my last full-time corporate job, and that was back in the WebEx days, which is, I don't know if you remember, this was one of the earliest, maybe the earliest big Trojans that happened, Poison Box. Maybe you remember that from the early aughts. And that took the company very quickly. And the guy this was Friday evening, and the guy that was in charge of security, the company was advanced thinking early aughts to actually have somebody in charge of InfoSec, sort of disappeared. Just wouldn't answer his phone, wouldn't answer his pager, wouldn't answer anything. And I happened to be in the office late, and the CIO at the time comes and knocks on the door, and she looks at me and says, "Hey, you've done security, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I suppose I've been doing security for a little while." And she says, "Can you help?" And so it ended up being a big effort to take care of that over the weekend. Everything went back online before the markets opened on Monday, which was an important factor in WebEx at the time. And then as a result of all this, I was asked to basically start a whole new security department. So that was my first official nomination to a security job, and my last full-time corporate position. As far as your second question, in terms of the vCISO bits, so I started this whole idea, and we're talking 03, I want to say 03, 04, something like that. Mostly out of necessity, because I was trying to build myself a consulting practice, and I needed something to do that maybe was a little bit different. And I found a client, I found another client, I got all of these things. It wasn't even called vCISO at the time, right? The term CISO was still fairly unused, so it was vCSO, right, without the I, for a little while. And then back in, I want to say 08, there's this fellow, long-time journalist, if you will, or in the space, called Evan Schumann, and he used to run, if I'm not mistaken, there used to be a newsletter called Storefront Backtalk.
We interviewed Evan just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I love Evan. Evan's a great guy, and Evan interviewed me.
Very colorful character.
Yes. Yep. Cool. Very, very cool. And long timer also, right? And he interviews me for something, and he says, "Hey, I noted that you're calling yourself this virtual CISO, right? And I've never heard this term before. And I did some research, and I've literally never found anybody else call themselves this way. Can you talk to me about that?" So we chatted a bit about that, and then at this point, I think he was right. Can't claim that he was right. I always add the caveat: nobody's claimed otherwise. As far as I know, I'm the first person to try it out, but that's about it.
Well, you're in kind of good company, because I know a lot of people that probably don't ever want to be claiming to be a CISO at all, yet alone be the first one and starting it all. But that's just a small segment of the population.
We're all broken, my friend. We are all broken.
That is true. I think if Evan says that you're the earliest recording or mention a virtual CISO, I think that's probably good enough for me. because he's a pretty darn thorough journalist. So,
Yep.
I guess I need to reintroduce you as the very first virtual CISO ever, and we have the privilege of speaking to you today on Security and Compliance Weekly. The other obligatory question I need to ask before I just kind of open it up to our panel and we just see where this goes is what we like to call the hot seat question, because we are a show that tries to bring security and compliance together in whatever way we can. We like to ask our guests just to get to know you a little bit and find out where you're coming from, where your head is on the topic. But just, what is your opinion? What are your thoughts on what we like to call the security versus compliance continuum?
So compliance should be the side effect of a decent security program. At the same time, it is in practice often a driver of the security program in the early stages. The reason for that, especially in SaaS companies, right? That's where it's really becomes that way. Is that their first goal, and the reason they even do security is because they need to sell to enterprise, and enterprise cares about their security posture. And the easiest way, the easiest sales tool that they can give them is a SOC 2 report or an ISO certification, right? Putting both of these things together, accepting the reality on the ground and the theory of how it should occur, how I feel about it is typically in a younger company, compliance to some degree will drive your initial efforts in a security program. Your goal should be to build a security program that will, address those compliance needs, but in a grander fashion. So you lay the foundation for a strong program while you're dealing with that checkbox, that very, very important sales tool that you're trying to generate. And once you get that, ultimately, you're going to then put that aside because you've done it. Here we go. You have your sales tool, enterprise sales team, you're good. And then you kind of continue to build on those foundations that you put together for compliance. And that will end up in itself generating much easier compliance down the road and additional certifications and what have you. So there's a bit of a give and take here, and a bit of an interaction between these two domains that is, I think, inevitable in business reality.
Gotcha. So, you've had your own company for quite a few years now. How long has Immune been going on?
So it's just Immune. By the way, I'll tell you something most people, the vast majority of people don't know. This is what happens when you let nerds try to do marketing. The word is immune. We just figured to get cute about it and switch the first I into EA, because EA, the actual name of the company is Engel and Associates LLC, because I started it. And when I started it, I was broke. And in the state of California, if you use your first name or last name or first and last name in the name of your company, you don't have to register a DBA, a doing business as. So it was called Engel and Associates. And so the EA in Immune is actually Engel and Associates, right? It's a cute way to bury the name of the company in there. And I've had it. Yeah, nobody knows this. So there you go. Now everybody knows this, or at least people who listen to this. I've had it, I started it as a sole proprietor, so it was just Engel and Associates in 2003. It got reincorporated into an LLC in 2007. Now it's an S Corp in its third incarnation.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask, sort of rounding out the hot seat question. Your company, I assume, you get a lot of your virtual CISO gigs sort of through your company, I would guess. And how much of your business do you rely upon the fact that companies are coming to, you mentioned the SaaS thing already, but, maybe it's a one-off, but, how much of your business are you getting because there's some company out there that for compliance reasons has to, put some semblance of a security program together, and therefore they need somebody to kind of figure it all out?
So like every services business, especially consulting, right? But services business that has some traction, and we have some traction, we have a track record. We've developed a specialty. Our specialty, if you follow the 80-20 rule, is SaaS and PaaS companies. That's where that's the core of our business. And we build security programs for them. Maybe it started with vCISO, but we don't actually sell vCISO services. What we sell are security program management services. Think of it as CISO in a box. Think of it however you want to call it. And we own the entire security program, top to bottom, soup to nuts, whatever American idiom you want to use for this. With the exception that we do not do what I like to call the clickety-clack. We don't configure systems. We don't write code. All the downright technical work, we can make many referrals to others, but we don't do it ourselves. And it's good for governance, and it's good for keeping that line of separation. But it's also good because when you talk to these technology companies, they don't want you to mess with this stuff. They really don't. I mean, they have their engineers. They want to manage things themselves. Gotcha. So that's our bread and butter. Companies come to us purely through referrals. We've never marketed. We have never actively sold to anybody. The company has never had any single person in that arena trying to do anything except, I suppose, me. The reality is that you will never hear of us until you need to. And then when you are looking for somebody to help you because, oh my God, you're deer in the headlights, all these enterprise customers that you really want to sell to are asking you questions that you don't know what to do with, then somebody's going to mention, hey, you might want to talk to these guys. And that's how they find how people find us generally. There's now other channels. We get referrals through VCs that have seen portfolio companies work with us and they like it. And then they meet a new portfolio company. So they'll send them to us as part of the funding round. So that's happening now. There's a bunch of other channels that it comes through, but it's never active selling. It's purely referral based.
Good.
And like I said, the vCISO thing is kind of funny. Everybody is now, a lot of people now are trying to sell it. I think a lot of people don't understand it and what it needs to do, but we actively don't even sell it anymore. It is like a program management rather than specifically vCISO.
So at some level, it's just a clever name.
We've been doing it for so long, it's kind of boring for us, right? vCISO.
Gotcha.
We used to
you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this. And once again, Barak, as you mentioned, like there's so many people actually in the arena now. And sorry, I have like fuzz from my Santa hat. I'm kind of curious though, like when does a company need to have a vCISO, and when do they actually need to have a permanent CISO? And maybe even a follow-up question related to that is, kind of actually from what you're actually saying, do companies even need CISOs?
Right. Thank you, by the way. I love this question. And I will put the caveat in front of it. I tend to make people angry with this, but generally speaking, I think most companies don't need full-time CISOs. I really don't. I also don't think they need full-time security staff. So let's go back to my mission, if you will, because when I started this idea, I had some reason as to why, and that clarified itself over time. The reality is that when companies started to look, let's talk about the CISO first, right? You want to get one. Well, guess what? The really, really good ones, the ones that are truly experienced and can legitimately call themselves a C-level executive, are few and far between, and they're going to cost you an arm and a leg. I apologize greatly. This is my Bluetooth dance. Can you guys still hear me?
We can still hear you.
Yep.
At least I can.
Okay. My Bluetooth was taken over by my phone for a second. I forgot to disconnect it earlier. Apologies for that. But, so you try to look for one of these people and you figure out they cost 7 figures. That's 3 times what my CEO makes. Can't hire you, right? What option do I have? Do I hire the 2 options typically people have is I'm going to hire an up-and-comer, somebody who wants to be a CISO. We'll give them the title, they'll learn on the job. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. But that's what people usually do. But those folks don't come in with the, if you will, business operations experience that's so essential to being a good C-level executive, right? And we can have a big discussion about this in terms of why CISOs fail and why I wrote that book.
Somebody ought to write a book about that.
Yeah, somebody ought to write a book about that. And then the other option is you hire a team of experts, right? SMEs, which is what apparently everybody really wants everybody to do. But here's the problem. Most companies, up to, when they get significantly larger, if you bring in an AppSec expert, right? And you're a software house, you're a SaaS company, and you task them with the security of your pipeline, you're still legitimately giving them, if they're good at what they do, 5 hours a week of legitimate work. 10 at the most. Let's avoid all the insanity of all the meetings that people invent out of nowhere to fill their free time, right? The white noise. But that's really the reality of it, right? A good CISO can do all of their work for a company on Monday. What do they do the rest of the week? And what happens when you hire a bunch of people that are very, very good at what they do? They're experts, right? They're SMEs. And you give them, 20% of legitimate work to do. They're not going to sit there to collect a paycheck. Most of them won't, right? They'll find things to do. And security is this amazing field because there's always something to do. There's always something to chase. There's always the things we don't know, and the things we don't know, we don't know. I absolutely hate that phrase, but it is out there. And what ends up happening is you have a team of people doing that and looking for things to do. They'll always find things to do. And that moment is the moment where the ocean gets boiled, right? That is the moment where everything starts going crazy. Security overweighs the organization, takes it down. And if you're a product company and you're trying to climb the hockey stick, what security is going to do at that moment is that. Right? Mm-hmm. That's what it's going to do to you. It's inevitable. You can't. We see this all the time. People can argue with me all they want. It happens all the time. You see it in the field, and that's why security leaders have such a short lifespan. What is it? 19 months on average now. I think it kind of creeped up a little bit from 18. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that we really want in the industry. We want to publicize ourselves, if you will, and there's a lot of benefit to vendors for this. There's a lot of people that buy that Kool-Aid, but ultimately, it's still a niche discipline. We're still a very immature one, too.
I would definitely agree with you that it's a niche discipline, but I am one of those people that will argue with you with regards to actually whether CISOs are necessary and some of the things you said. In particular, this notion that, hey, security can slow a product team down. Full disclosure, I am a CISO, done it a couple of times. Also, full disclosure, at least I consider myself an application security expert. Where I've seen one of the differences you're talking about, I definitely agree with you, especially people that, what I would call have a legacy mentality towards security. They slow businesses down. I would argue that there are real legitimate examples of where security teams actually accelerated companies though and sped companies up. Netflix is a great example. Netflix literally could not do the business that it does without their security team. Their security team, however, looks different than the security team that you would see at a bank or that you would see at a defense contractor. And I would argue to say that there are several, at least in Silicon Valley, where the security team is core to the actual product itself. And that actually could just be nuanced because of the nature of some of these products. But I am kind of curious if you see any daylight there or should we continue fighting about this?
Well, no, I think, thank you for proving my point. Right, Netflix is not every company is Netflix. The companies I talk about, right, everybody's rushing to hire CISOs when they have 40 employees. That's nonsense, right? You don't need to do that. Netflix is a massive business, and by the way, I love their approach. They're one that I particularly like because they're the only ones that not only talk about contextual security. They actually do contextual security. They're unlike all these people that talk about risk-based security management and really don't understand it. These guys do. So I have a lot of appreciation for them. But how many Netflixes do you know?
Oh, yeah,
I know one.
I can literally name at least 10. So there's Square, Stripe, Twilio, Gusto, NetSuite, Airbnb. I would argue to say that actually a lot of the Bay Area, and in particular, people that actually came out of Y Combinator, are very much in this discipline of essentially security teams that are actually engineering teams and pragmatic security, meaning that they are actually building along with the product, building for the product, and taking a more pragmatic approach. Your point about people
again, you mentioned
security early definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, I was about to say too,
but you're mentioning very large. You're mentioning very large companies. Ultimately, very large brands. I'm not talking about them. They need those teams.
They weren't large when they started with their security journeys, right? So like Twilio. I mean, I was hired at Twilio when Twilio was less than 100 people.
Yeah.
And Square, the security personnel were literally some of the very first people hired at the company.
Yeah.
Kat,
And
do you have more of something to add? I know you keep trying to jump in. Please. Kat. Jump in.
Oh, okay. You were saying me. I'm like, oh, okay. I'll just sit back. Yeah, no. What I was going to say was exactly what Flea was saying, because I'm sitting here going, really? We don't need staff or CISOs? Because I've walked in and had to like save a couple of startups up in here, like because they didn't think about security when they should have super early on. That's like I'm out here in the Bay Area too, and some of these startups and stuff like that, like I'm not going to rattle off some of the names because they're clients, but I've been that internal person that's been hired at it's medium size and it's about to take off and get bigger. And they had so much tech debt that it actually like stunted their growth for like 3 freaking years, and it could have been headed off if they had somebody that was on the team focused on security, Like I've just seen a lot of it. I've got 40 clients like that out here just locally. So I'm kind of like, really? We don't need CISOs and like security staff and shit? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if you need security staff. I think it depends on the phase of the company and the size of them. Like in an ideal world, like a lot, and I think maybe you've even hinted this, Barak, like a lot of the things that you were doing as a virtual CISO was telling people what to do, but the people themselves were doing it. So I mean, it kind of, the question is it required to have a security specialist to do security work? And I think there's actually a lot of room for, exploration of that debate. I'm solely on the side of, hey, you probably actually don't need security people to actually do some of this security work. Like somebody, configuring AWS properly. You don't have to have a security person actually do that. It helps if they don't actually know where to get started. But there's a lot of documentation online. A lot of people in DevOps, et cetera, are very security conscious. A lot of us actually that are in security didn't actually even come from a security background. We came from like a networking background or just a general IT administration background.
So I think I want to be careful, right? Because it seems like you're interpreting what I'm saying as the company doesn't need security. That's not what I'm saying at all. All I'm saying is that if a company with 50 employees or even 100 employees goes out and hires a 5-person security team, which seems to be the trending recommendation in the Valley these days, those people will not have full-time jobs to do, and they will likely, because they come without the experience of understanding things like the impact that security can have on business operations, not on technology. Technology is a facet of security. It's a small facet of security in my mind. At the end of the day, then they're going to weigh the company down. They're going to create a lot of dissatisfaction. And again, we see these effects in the field. We see them happening. There's a reason why security leaders become dissatisfied with their jobs across the board. And there's a reason why companies become dissatisfied with their security leaders across the board. It's not because boards don't listen. Because we do not have mature enough leaders, not enough of them in the industry to be able to speak to a board in the language the board understands. It's one of the things that always amuses me, right? We should be the peers of the other C-level executives who report directly to the CEO. I have to ask you the question, what have you done to learn to speak to the CEO? What have you done to learn to understand how security impacts the company? What actual... Now, and this is not about vulnerabilities and protecting the product or what have you. These are things related to understanding and recasting your role as in the legal realm as the person who protects the company from technology and data liability, just like the general counsel protects it from commercial liability. Do you even understand what you're looking for? Do you understand cash flows? I have a lot of problems with the self-styling that a lot of security leaders have, which is, we're the guards at the gate. We're the ones protecting the company. You're not protecting the company. If you are the guard at the gate, if you're the person who thinks of themselves as the person who protecting the company, then by all means, please go ahead and do that. But the deals are going to be done in the basement that you've never heard of and don't even know how to get to without you present. And then you're not really a corporate leader. You're just somebody who self-styles themselves as a corporate leader and is very steeped in your technology expertise. My point is, all of these things are necessary. Security is necessary even early on. And some of our customers come in at we are pre-Series A now, right? This is the cycles have gone earlier and earlier. But they don't need that staff full time. That's the point I'm trying to make. And of course, I would make it, right? I created an entire business around this idea. I just think that there is a tremendous risk, a massive, massive risk to the company from doing too much security. And it is perhaps even greater than doing too little early on.
I'll 100% actually agree with you on that. One of the things that I've told some early startups is literally one of their biggest risks is not building the right thing or shipping too late, right? It's like, yep, obviously security is important. Taking care of customer data is important. However, if you're not able to actually hit market in time for the customer demand, et cetera, the best security in the world is not going to help you, right? And so like your biggest risk is the fact that, hey, your business isn't gaining traction. And that is ultimately what you actually want to protect. It's always interesting because to some extent, bringing in a security team can be almost like, and this is going to be like a horrible analogy, it's just like bad medicine to some extent. And that you can actually make the problem worse because you gave somebody too much Tylenol, right? When all they had was a minor stress headache.
So now that we understand each other on this, I can tell you that the typical life cycle for many of our customers is to have us come on board and do what we do up to the point where it starts to make sense and there's enough real demand internally for the services of full-time staff. And then we just, help make the transition over. It usually happens when they're thinking of an exit, right? With pre-IPO, something like that. That typically is a stage where that happens. And it makes perfect sense. So you're getting what you need when you need it, and you're not doing too much, and it's not too disruptive, and you're still building foundations. And, I also don't believe in absolute security, which, there's always going to be issues. But at the end of the day, the thing you need to worry about is the business operating. And early stage, even mid stage, all you care about is growth. You have to align yourselves there. You have to understand and see your job and cast yourself through that lens. Otherwise, you get lost and you end up pissing everybody off. And then you have the whole thing about, and I know you guys know a lot of people like that, right? The CISOs that, it's a funky little job, right? Security it operates on the most fundamental human emotion. It's fear, right? So everybody's afraid of it. Nobody understands it very well other than you, right? But everybody knows they need it. So ultimately, when you walk in and you're the new security leader, you're kind of given an authority through the job, but it is so easy to abuse, and so many people do. And so they operate through that fear because it moves people, right? It's a very easy emotion to manipulate. And so because it's easy to manipulate, a lot of us use it too often, right? And I think that is another reason why we have such a revolving door in the industry, right? It's there's so many broken parts here, and of course vendors aren't helping. I have this thing I like to say: if you actually took the aggregate claims of unique market shares across the entire security vendor space, right, and you kind of do a back of a paper napkin calculation of how big of a market share they all address together, and in total, you realize that the security market in itself is about 3 times the size of the global GDP on an annual basis. So I guess security really is very important, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sitting here listening to this, and because I have a DoD background, I learned information security from an organization whose entire business was information security.
Totally different world, yes.
Well, it's a different world, but I don't know what you would call sort of your approach, very generically or collectively, the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley kind of approach to security. It's different, but in some ways it's more pragmatic and focused, is what I'm hearing, which is significantly different from all the companies that are out there in the world and in the country that aren't doing sort of the national security, national defense mission, and aren't directly linked to the traditional sort of verticals where we expect to see security, banking, financial institution, stuff like that. There's at least a pragmatism to, okay, you're talking about primarily security for product companies and vendors who I collectively hate with a passion, because I think they're the bane of most companies' understanding of how they need to apply security for companies that are the users and the consumers of all these vendors and products out there. So I find it to be a fascinating mix, but I'm not. And I'm not saying I'm disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just a very different perspective, but it's actually a thoughtful, pragmatic perspective, which is more interesting than what I usually get, which is, well, I don't really understand security and care about security, but I know I have to do it because I have this compliance requirement, and I don't want to understand it. I just want to get my boxes checked type of mentality.
Well, so it gets worse than that, right? So show me how many security leaders would even have the thought creep into their minds, right? Of, well, before I even start thinking about this particular challenge or decision I need to make, right? Let me consider the current phase in the business cycle that the company is in. Is it greenfield? Are we protecting turf? Is it a shrinking market? Are any of these things entering your thought process as you're making security decisions? Because they should. You're claiming that you're a C-level executive. If you're not considering those fundamental business operations things, such as where is my business in its business cycle, and even understand what a business cycle means and what all those phases are, then I hate to tell you, you're not making good company decisions. Yes, you're making perhaps good technology decisions, and that's fine. But that is the reason you're not successful as a C-level executive. And what I keep hearing is all this frustration. Oh my God, we're not being treated seriously as security leaders. And whose fault is that? Certainly not the other executives. It's you.
That definitely resonates to you with regards to CISOs, or at least people who want to be CISOs or want to have the same level of respect, learning to adapt to what other C-level executives are doing. I do have a challenge for you, Barak, because one of the things that actually I'm thinking about is the journey for CIOs and the journey for CTOs as well. And the reason why I mentioned that is like some of the things that you've said as essentially things that are actually missing from CISOs are a lot of the same criticisms that people previously had around CIOs and CTOs. And I'm kind of curious, how should CISOs start their journey so that they're starting to look more like CTOs and CIOs, as opposed to kind of like where we are right now with CISOs, where it does feel a little bit like the CIO back in the late 80s, early 90s.
I love that, because this is exactly right. And I actually speak about this a lot. So that is where we are right now. So if you recall back, the CIOs in the late 80s, early 90s, what were they? There was Windows system administrators that got a fancy title and had to learn on the job. That's where we are right now in security. So that you have a small cadre of people that have been doing it for a while, right? And they really are seasoned, and they can do this at the largest levels or in the most complex environments properly. And then you have, you have a generation of folks that are learning on the job right now, and that's totally fine. I think it goes back to what I said earlier. It's totally fine. It's understood. We need to mature. I think that we're trying to kind of put the cart in front of the horse to some degree. This is not going to happen overnight. It's going to we need this generation of leaders that exists now, that learning on the job in 10, 20 years is going to become the next set of proper C-level CISOs. By the way, I do think that we're going to end up getting things merged together. And instead of CISO, it's going to be CISO with a slash between the I and the S. So it's not going to be Chief Information Security Officer. It's going to be Chief Information and Security Officer. Yeah. It seems almost inevitable. But this is a normal process, right? And yeah, just patience. It's happening. It will continue to happen. Right now, we just don't have enough of these folks. So let's not jump the gun. Understand that this is happening, and that's really my answer to that. There's nothing wrong with that, as understanding that as part of evolution of the field.
No,
on that note, hold on, Flea. On that note, we need to insert a break here. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll pick up the conversation again. But if we have to break it somewhere, this is the place. Be right back.